Hello, thank you for joining me. Today I want to talk about diplomacy. And the diplomacy that I'm referring to is not necessarily between nation states, which is certainly more topical now as a current affairs issue. But rather, I want to talk about diplomacy in our everyday lives. Now, diplomacy between nation states is, of course, extremely important, but we sometimes overlook the fact that actually every single one of us is like a little mini government in ourselves. What I mean by that is that, particularly in societies where we value the individual, I think we put an emphasis on how we interact with other people, and people are constantly judged based on how they interact with others. So if you have someone who's very standoffish, who's very confrontational, they're going to get a reputation. If you get someone who is very shy, they're going to get a reputation. If you get someone who is very social, they're going to get a reputation. Reputations can be negative or positive. Now, one thing that I think is universally true is that regardless of the personality, nobody likes to feel like a pushover. It's just that some people find a way to be more assertive than others. But what I want to drive at here is that there are times in life that we sometimes simply have to avoid confrontation for the greater good of the situation. What I mean by that is that it's almost impossible to go through life to whether it be in your workplace or your social life without at some point someone saying something or doing something that will either get on your nerves or offend you or um, you won't be very happy with. Now, again, people are individuals and some people are a lot more laid back than others. They don't let things get to them so much. But unless you're a robot, everybody, in my opinion, has something that will rub them up the wrong way, to use a British expression. And I think the real question is how do we deal with this? Now, there are some people who have an anger problem and they would lash out every time they're angry. There's some people who have an anger problem and they wouldn't necessarily resort to violence, but they would find it hard to contain that anger. I can't say I'd be lying if I said I was the calmest person in the world. There are things that make me angry, and there's things that I probably think more about, think, overthink. It's one of my shortcomings, I guess. I do overthink some things. But I find that there are sometimes slights that we have to deal with, and we have to interpret them either as they are intended, which is a slight, or, which is probably more common, simply a misunderstanding. How many times do we have awkward situations, little awkward innuendos, little awkward interactions in life, and we have to simply let them go because if we dwelled on such things all the time, I think we'd go out of our mind. So, in my view, the importance of diplomacy in everyday life isn't a weakness, it's simply practical. Now, of course, we have to be assertive, and I think we would beat ourselves up and we would end up, it would be damaging to not be assertive and never ever sort of speak out if we feel that someone clearly is in the wrong. If they're being blatantly rude towards us or disrespectful, I think it's important to say something. And this isn't something that can be taught. That sort of assertiveness comes from within and it can take time. But I do think that the importance of letting things go cannot be understated because ultimately we think that it makes us weak. You know, there's this great ego in human nature, but actually, the truth is, we all at some point have probably ourselves said something that we didn't mean, or maybe we cracked a joke that didn't go down too well, or whatever. Misunderstandings happen. And I think the important thing is to let things go. Now, obviously, there are some things you can't let go. If someone insults your dead relative, you're not going to let that go, etc. But most situations, I think you have to see it as water under the bridge. It's something I've learned in life. Because if you don't, you'll end up letting that anger and bitterness consume you. Whether it's justified or not, the important thing is the pragmatism of it. It's not necessarily about right and wrong, it's about pragmatism first and foremost. And sometimes in life, there are things that are wrong, unjust, but we simply can't do anything about them. Or, more importantly, they are not significant enough to invest time to doing something about them. So, okay, you might deal with a rude person. Let's say you work in a shop. Um, as I have done, I've dealt with rude customers and I could have been as rude as them. But what would be the point? It's not personal. It's not very nice, but it's not personal. So why let their ignorance, their rudeness consume your thinking? And this is where diplomacy is so very important. So let me know your thoughts. I'm going to leave it there. I didn't want to make this a very long video. Diplomacy, in my view, is very important. Otherwise, you get people, especially when drink is involved, I'm going to go close with this point, and they just lash out. And whether it's just or not, we cannot handle life that way, because then you're going to end up in a situation where your answer to everything is to lash out. Some people certainly deserve it. I mean, I'm not one of these people who say, oh, just let it go, it doesn't matter. There are some people that would, could do with a smack across the face. But we can't do that because in an adult world, we have to be responsible for our own actions. As tempting as it is, you cannot lash out every time someone winds you up. So I'll leave it there. I feel that the importance of personal diplomacy is very, very, very important. And it all comes down to judging a situation, being assertive, and yes, standing our ground when need be. Let me know your thoughts and thanks for watching.